nice and cold and cloudy Islamabad at Serena Hotel. Hopefully it doesn't rain on me, otherwise I'll have to run inside. Um, so yeah, I am all kind of bundled up on the inside. I have long underwear on so that I can sit outdoors. I recommend to a lot of my patients that just spend as much time as possible outside, even if you have to bundle up, in the winter time. It's really, really beneficial. What I realized recently was that my family, my wife and my three kids have been sick, like it seems like half a dozen times in the last 6 months, and I have not gotten sick from them once, which is bizarre, right? I've been living with them, in close contact with them. I don't think I've ever experienced a streak like that in my entire life, where if somebody was sick in my own house, I didn't get sick from them. I mean, in the past, I've probably at least half the time, maybe 25% of the time, but usually you kind of get sick, right? I mean, it's pretty unusual, especially to go through like 5, 6 times of other people being sick around you and like sick for like weeks sometimes, and you don't get sick. So I think that the thing that really makes the biggest difference in my experience is sunlight. And obviously that's in part linked to vitamin D levels. So my vitamin D levels used to be very low. So obviously that's a big part of it. But I think there's a lot more to it, right? So sunlight directly powers your cellular mitochondria and gives you more energy than you would have without sunlight. So it's a direct source of energy, right? And it light at the right time. So there's certain nutrients that are really powerful nutrients when you get them at the right time, and they're very harmful anti-nutrients or even toxins when you get exposed to them at the wrong time. So sunlight, you can't be exposed to it at the wrong time, but you can be exposed to light at the wrong time. So after dark, light is very toxic. It triggers cortisol, inflammation, stress, and it inhibits melatonin. So it interferes dramatically with your ability to sleep and recover. And similarly, food in the middle of the night is not going to be good for you. It's going to throw off all your hormonal rhythms. Your circadian rhythm is basically linked to the pattern of light cycles that are in nature. And those light cycles will change throughout the year. So I was just mentioning this morning to somebody, that a patient of mine that I just saw. So he was asking, I was really stressing because I've told him, the last few visits or the last few months, fix your light environment, fix your light environment. But, until people really deeply understand it, until it clicks, until you say the right words, it just doesn't make sense. And to kind of introduce this topic, I'll just say, I've mentioned this a lot in the past, this study done on Italian American town. Maybe it was in Connecticut decades ago by a group of Harvard researchers. And the reason I mention it is that I'll give people a list of recommendations sometimes, and they include these lifestyle things, and they'll look at it and they'll be like, well, number 7 can't be that important. I mean, come on, right? And so there's a bunch of these little things like grounding. Well, what's the big deal? Um, you know, Spending more time with friends and family, right? How important could that possibly be? And so to understand how important it could possibly be, this study on this Italian American town is very illustrative. So this town had half the rate of heart disease as the rest of the country. What that means is, say you had, out of 1,000 people, 100 of them have heart disease in most of America, right? On average, just some round numbers, right? And in this town, instead of 100 people having heart disease out of every 1,000, it was 50 having heart disease out of every 1,000. Maybe 100,000, but whatever, just for the numbers, for the sake of illustration. Which means that some people had no heart disease when you would have expected them to have heart disease, right? And so the question was, why do they have half the rate of heart disease? Why do some people have no heart disease when we expect that they should have heart disease? Is it something in the water? Is it something they're doing? Is it their genes? It was none of that stuff. On the surface, they appeared to be exactly the same as everyone else. They had no special genes, no special diet. They drank and smoked, and they were overweight, and they, did everything wrong. They didn't sleep enough. They worked too much, whatever, right? They ate all the wrong foods, supposedly, right? Junk food, everything, right? They were stressed out. They watched too much TV. Whatever you can imagine that you can do to cause heart disease, they did it just like everyone else in America. And so they went there and they studied, okay, what is different about them? There must be something, right? We live in a universe of cause and effect. There will always be a cause for the effect. And what they found was that the only thing they can identify that was different was that they had really strong family ties and friendship ties, and really strong relationships, and they spent a lot of time with friends and family, and they had intimacy, right? So it wasn't just superficial, but intimate relationships. And that was enough to make all the difference for some people. For half the people that should have had heart disease in that city, in that town, who didn't have heart disease, all the difference was made by just this one thing. Okay, so that one thing that is on my list of like 30 different lifestyle changes to make, that I send to a patient, or that I tell you guys about, that one thing that you think makes no difference could make all the difference for you. So light is like that. I think it's as important as anything else. And the things that we think are least important are probably more important than the things that we think are the most important, oftentimes, especially since you're not doing those things, right? The things you don't think are important, you're not doing them. So that by itself makes them probably the most important things for you. So whatever you're already doing, it's not, it may not be helping, or it's helped a little bit, but the rest of the way could be just fix, and just pick one thing at a time, introduce it until you get used to it. It takes a few weeks to get used to some new habit, and then move on to the next habit. And eventually, after a year or two, your entire life is transformed, and your health is transformed with it. So now I have to try to like go back in my mind to where I started with this branch. What was I trying to say about light, right? So light at the wrong time at night. Yeah, I remember where I was going with it. So at the wrong time, it's going to be toxic. And so this patient of mine was asking me, well, I live in Chicago. I live up north, say in Albuquerque, not Albuquerque, in Alberta, Canada, or something, or I live near the North Pole, and it gets dark here at it starts getting dark, the sun starts setting around like 5 p.m. Sun sets at like 5:50 p.m. um, what about that, right? Can't I keep the lights on a little bit, right? So if you were in an environment like near the equator, where you get basically equal amounts of daylight and dark every day throughout the year, your body, and the temperature is different at that area, everything is different about the environment, the foods are different that are available there, and so if you live in that environment, then you follow the rhythm of the seasons in that environment, right? And you will be healthy. If you live up north, where in the winter the nights are very long and the days are very short, and in the summer it's the opposite, the days are very long and the nights are very short, your body expects you to follow the rhythm of that environment in order to be healthy, right? So almost like you need to hibernate in the winter, you need to sleep more in the winter and work more in the summer. Okay, so you need to take your cues from the environment that you're in if you want to be healthy. So you can't take the lifestyle of like a tropical island, live that same lifestyle in New York or Chicago or Alberta, Canada. So you have to accept the fact that you are basically a slave to the environment that you're in, and you have to follow that environment. And you're going to need to probably sleep more in the winter, or at least be resting more in the winter and more active during the summertime. So that's really important. And then eat with the seasons as well. Eat what's seasonal and not what's not seasonal. And these things can be of profound importance for healing, because healing is basically sending your body the right signals, right? Again, it's just cause and effect. And so you can figure out what all the possible causes could be, to create the illness effect in you. Why isn't your body healing, right? It's just like when you keep cutting yourself in the same spot every day, you'll never heal that wound. It'll just fester and get worse and worse, and eventually get infected, and eventually get deeper and become a bone infection, become sepsis, and eventually kill you. But if you stop cutting the same spot especially if you stop it early enough, it'll just heal. It'll just heal on its own. You don't have to like give yourself curcumin to make it heal, or shoot yourself up with vitamin D to make it heal. As long as you have the basic building blocks for healing, you're eating enough, you get enough calories, you have enough micronutrients, whatever, it'll heal, right? It's just natural, right? Your body heals itself. And even some tissues, they're harder to heal. They may take longer because they don't have as much blood supply, or they may need more kind of effort to like send them the right signals to heal, like your brain, for example. You may need to use it so that it comes back, right? So you may need to keep trying to move that hand that's paralyzed over the course of 6 to 12 months in order for the brain to rewire and start actually moving it. So sometimes there are certain signals that you have to send beyond just like sitting back and letting your skin, a cut on your skin heal by itself. Why is the skin healing? Because it's getting the right signals. You just don't have to do them yourself, right? So it's exposed to the environment, and it's like, oh, I'm not supposed to be exposed. The tissues underneath the skin are like, oh, this is not right. I need to be covered up. And so, your body gets the signals it needs to heal your skin, and then it heals your skin. For other tissues, you need to send the signal yourself. You have to actively do something. You have to make a demand on that organ or tissue in order for it to realize that, hey, my job isn't done for this life, right? Like I can't just go to sleep for the rest of my life. Same with a lot of things like the thyroid. If you a crutch by giving yourself thyroid, it's never going to get the signal that it needs to make some thyroid hormone, right? So if you're up north, still the light environment is important, but you need to take the cues from the natural rhythms of the day and night. And what those will do, they'll sync up all your daily hormonal cycles to the sun, and that's your circadian rhythm. And if they're not synced up, then you'll have trouble healing. So you won't get the right signals. All right, so let's see if we have anyone in the chat. Yes, info seeker is here again. Are you aware of prolonged fasting mimicking diet? Yes, I'm aware of the prolonged fasting mimicking diet. And it's not a perfect mimicker of fasting, right? You can't perfectly mimic fasting while you're eating calories, but you can partly mimic it. So we are like plants. Who knew? Yeah. Philips Hue lights. That's interesting. So I don't think it's possible to replace the sun, but you can do better than what we're doing. So smart lighting, automate your lights. They turn off at certain times, I suppose, or they get dim, and maybe they have a better light spectrum. So I just as a reminder to people, I've probably mentioned it before, that even if you have a house made of glass and it looks like amazingly bright and wonderful and you're cheerful and everything, that glass, even if it's perfectly clear, even if you step indoors, you check out the light, you step outdoors, you look at the light, doesn't look any different. Same light, right? All the visible light is passing through the glass, right? It's clear to our eyes because all the visible spectrum passes through it. But it's not clear. It's blocking the invisible spectrum. It's blocking infrared, it's blocking UVA, it's blocking UVB. Without those parts of the visible of the light spectrum, the blue light in the visible spectrum becomes, in a sense, toxic. It becomes very stressful for our bodies. And so we're under a lot of stress when we're indoors all the time, let alone with artificial lighting, right? So some people don't have a lot of windows, they don't have a lot of natural light. And we call it natural light, but it's not natural light. Okay, that's my whole point here. It's unnatural light. It's filtered light. It's processed light, just like processed food. You process the light before you've exposed yourself to it, and people think they're doing a good thing, blocking out the UVB, especially, right? They're like, oh, skin cancer. You're not doing a good thing. You're not doing yourself any benefit. You are exposing yourself to undue stress. So we have a lot of stress with living in civilization. These civilizational diseases are in part due to a lot of stressors that were not present for our ancestors. So you need to either open the window completely, let the sun stream in without going through anything, or just go outside, right? So again, even if your skin is not directly exposed to infrared, it passes through your clothing and still it fills up your whole body with light. So if you could see it, and there are, probably animals that can see infrared, and there are certainly instruments that we have that can see infrared, right? If you had one of those instruments inside your body, you would see infrared light everywhere. It's filling up your entire body when you're exposed to it, helping your mitochondria, changing the consistency of your blood, changing a lot of things in your body, and it has a profound effect. And this is the light, this is the environment that we are designed for. So if you take us out of the optimal environment, as though you're taking a fish out of the ocean and putting it into a dirty fish bowl, right? It's not going to be healthy. It can't possibly be healthy. The requirements for health are irreducibly complex. You cannot reduce them at all, right? You need the sun. You can't get by without the sun. You can't replace the sun with a pill or with a light bulb, right? You can get some of the effects, but you're not going to get all the effects, right? So you're not going to. So your environment that is required for optimal health is irreducibly complex, and it can't be substituted for with anything else that's not it, right? So I hope that's clear. All right, so how can we determine if oxygen is being used efficiently? So one of the easiest ways to determine if your body's utilizing oxygen efficiently is to get a arterial blood gas and a venous blood gas. And you would want to get the arterial blood gas. Okay, let me think about this. So it's so the arterial blood is oxygenated, right? It comes from your lungs, goes to your tissues, and then your tissues are supposed to extract oxygen, and then you get venous blood, right, which goes back to your lungs to get filled up with oxygen again. So in a lot of people with long haul and chronic fatigue syndrome, vaccine injury, their tissues for some reason are not taking up the oxygen, right? You'll even find this on Wikipedia under chronic fatigue syndrome. One of the things that they've found in chronic fatigue patients is just this. There seems to be like almost a shunt, like where your venous blood that's leaving your tissues has too much oxygen in it. It has not, your tissues have not extracted enough oxygen from that blood. So what I would recommend doing is do arterial blood gas at rest, and then you do a venous blood gas at rest, and then you exercise for maybe 10-15 minutes, like a stress test. Do a stress test type of exercise, like on a treadmill or just jumping jacks, whatever, and then check another venous blood gas after the exercise, and then send them off to the lab, get the results, and see whether your venous blood gas before and after exercise are in the normal ranges, or whether the oxygen levels are too high, which means your tissues didn't absorb the oxygen adequately. So I do recommend this now for everyone to see where they're at. And then if you're not extracting oxygen properly, you can do exercise with oxygen therapy. You can do Buteyko breathing. You can just do regular oxygen therapy, 100% oxygen with oxygen concentrator, which I'm recommending to a lot of people nowadays as a stem cell therapy. All right, so InfoSeeker clarifies hue lights for the evening. So maybe they turn redder into a redder shade, but it's really important that, blue blockers or like having red lights at night are not the perfect solution. You also have to have dim lighting, and it's best if it's near the floor instead of over your head, so your brain doesn't think that the sun is above you. And it's best to just not turn on the lights at all. So there's really no replacement, because the lights are only on because you need to do something, and you shouldn't be doing that thing at night, right? So that's the point. You shouldn't be listening to a podcast. You shouldn't be using your brain. You shouldn't be reading something. You shouldn't be anything. You should be like resting, meditating, maybe praying and sleeping, right? And if the night is really long and you're really healthy, and you can't sleep that whole time, like maybe the night is like 12 hours long, or it's dark from sunset to sunrise is like too long for you, then in the middle, like eventually you'll start to wake up in the middle, and you can stretch, you can do yoga, you can do some breath work, you can meditate, you can do whatever you want in that time. You could even talk to somebody, but don't do anything stressful. Don't read, don't listen to a podcast, don't turn on the computer, don't turn on social media. The night is for rest. It's not for the stuff that you're supposed to do during the day, which is activity and thinking and information processing and eating and being exposed to light and talking about stressful things and working, right? That's not nighttime stuff. Amy says, my son is prone to croup, but he is healthy otherwise. Any tips to reduce croup in kids? So, it's a complicated question. I don't know your son, but in general, the light environment has a huge role to play. Like I was saying earlier, I really think that it made the biggest difference for me. Um, you could get part of the way there by just making sure his vitamin D levels are optimized. For optimal vitamin D levels, they should be usually between 30 and 100. And, most people need to be above 50 to 100 with a PTH that's around 20 or below 20, parathyroid hormone, and a normal range of calcium. So as long as all those things apply, then you're probably optimal. You have optimal vitamin D. You also need vitamin A for immune system health, and vitamin E and vitamin K2 and vitamin K. And magnesium is really important for the functioning of vitamin D and a lot of other chemical reactions in the body. So most people are low in magnesium. And then zinc and copper are obviously necessary. So, you can, if somebody's prone to something like that, um, either they have some sort of micronutrient deficiency, they have some sort of toxicity from a recent vaccine, they have been taking antibiotics too often, and those are unnecessary for healing 99.9% of the time from even bacterial infections. They're just not necessary. Um, for bronchitis, we know they're just not necessary. But people convince you that you need to take an antibiotic, otherwise you're not going to get better. And it sometimes will speed up getting better, but then it leaves you prone to getting the same thing again, right? And one way of looking at this, which may be correct or partly correct, or the case in some people, is that it's something like an infection, like an upper respiratory infection or any infection. Your body kind of uses it as an excuse, perhaps, to get rid of toxins, to expel toxins from it, from the lungs. It wants to expel toxins. And when you cut it short, it hasn't been able to expel all the toxins it wanted to expel. So then it's like looking for another chance to pick up that bacteria and get sick and help to expel those toxins. In traditional medical systems, if the person was too weak to expel the toxins, they would give them something to make them cough or vomit or have diarrhea, because they couldn't do it themselves, right? So their body was too weak to vomit up the thing that they had eaten, even though they felt really nauseated. Their body was too weak to vomit, so they would give them an emetic to make them vomit, right? So your body is taking perhaps this chance, when this crew, the bug comes around and it gets exposed to it. It's like, aha, I'm going to take this and I'm going to get sick and I'm going to, cough up all the stuff that's in my lungs, and then I'll be fine. But you take an antibiotic instead, and you don't get to complete that. And then it just comes along again, and it keeps coming until you let it finish what it was trying to do, maybe, and then maybe it won't happen again. Um, so that's one possibility. I'm not saying that's exactly what's happening in your son, and because there's other possibilities here. It's possible that he has low immune function from something. Maybe he's prone to, inflammation from shedding. People who are shedding, spike protein. Maybe he got a bunch of vaccines recently, and they have, riled up his immune system, and it's not working properly. So, but the places to start would be, with the, optimizing micronutrients, optimizing the light environment, which is important for optimizing health. And um and also what you could do is cut it short the next, if it happens again, at the very first sign of him starting to get sick, you give him like 10-20 grams of sorbitol palmitate, which is vitamin C, which you can mix into juice. That specific form of ascorbic acid, ascorbyl palmitate, which is combined to palmitic acid. So it will mix, not great. I mean, I think it's fat soluble, so it'll mix better into fat, but you can kind of like mix it up into water and it'll become a suspension, so you can drink it easily, and it's not bitter the way ascorbic acid is. So, for a son, it depends on how old he is, how much weight he has. For adults, I usually tell them 30 to 50 grams all at once, not milligrams, grams. Um, and that's incredibly effective if you take it the very first sign of symptoms. You're usually better within 24 hours. So that would be one way to treat it and cut it short. Again, this is kind of like in opposition to what I was saying earlier of trying to get out what's, maybe stuck inside his lungs. Um, but it could also, if that's not the issue, if he doesn't have some toxins that he's trying to get out, and if he does have like an immune dysfunction, then this would help with the immune dysfunction by killing the bacteria that's causing the illness before it gets strong enough of a foothold to really make him sick, and to make him, and to get to the point where he would have to take an antibiotic to get better. Yes, year 100. Apparently, being around foliage bounces all these rays better back to you. Yeah. So yeah, being outdoors does more than just, like, green light is also really helpful. So like InfoSeeker's saying, like, you're exposed to green wavelengths a lot when you're outside, in a lot of places, obviously not in the desert, but in some places where there is greenery, like here. And that's also very calming and very beneficial for your immune system. But also, there are scent compounds that are released by foliage, by grass, by trees, everything, that affect your immune system as well. So you really can't substitute for the natural environment. It's again, like I said, irreducibly complex. InfoSeeker says, do you recommend red light therapy then? So I recommend red light therapy and infrared therapy to people who can't spend most of the day outdoors. I mean, really, nothing can substitute for spending most of the day outside, and getting direct sun from sunrise to 30 minutes after sunrise, and from 30 minutes before sunset to sunset, and at some point in the middle of the day as well. Nothing substitutes for that. But if you just can't get it right for now, make it a goal of yours that you will design a life eventually where you can get it. And until then, use red light and infrared therapy as a substitute to help balance out the effects of blue light that you may be exposed to during the day at work or wherever. But make it a longer term, midterm, longer term goal that you can optimize your lighting environment, so that you can optimize your health as well. InfoSeeker says ABG, venous divided by arterial, gives you oxygen extraction ratio. Exactly. And Facebook user says, where do I use those tests? This is not the person's name. They're not, but it doesn't show me on this streaming software people what their names are on Facebook. It just tells me they're a Facebook user. So any lab will do, should be able to do an ABG and BBG. I mean, I used to do ABGs in the hospital with a respiratory therapist, so I can't guarantee that LabCorp has somebody qualified to do an ABG. So you'd have to ask them. I don't have a lot of experience with outpatient medicine. But maybe a mobile lab draw would be allowed to do an ABG, or trained to do it. So anyway, I'm not 100% sure about the ABG. BBG they should be able to do, because it's the same venous blood that they're drawing for other things. They can get the venous blood gas from that same vein poke, but for the ABG they have to insert the needle into an artery. So they have to feel for the pulsation of the artery at your wrist usually, and then insert it in, and then the blood comes out. It's painful compared to a venous blood draw. Just try not to be focusing on it, so tell them, don't warn me before you do it, like, look at something else, listen to something else, I don't know, rub yourself or something, like give yourself some other stimulation to distract yourself from them poking a needle into your artery. Okay, if I can exercise now, does that mean my body is doing okay with oxygen uptake? It doesn't. I mean, it could be doing better. It's a good sign that your oxygen uptake's not terrible, but it still may not be optimal, or even back to complete normal. But it's much more likely that it is if you're exercising fine now. InfoSeeker says firelight is apparently good. Yeah, I agree. Firelight and probably moonlight, since it's natural. But at some point, you got to go to sleep, right? And for some people, they're very sensitive to even like the amount of light that comes from a bright moon, like a full moon. So again, natural rhythms of the world, right? Like the moonlight is bright. Really, you have a full moon for a few days, right? And it's not every single night that you're going to have super bright full moon, right? It's going to be some nights. And nowadays, I mean, just the light pollution from the city is usually more than the light of the moon, in a lot of places. And it's every night. It's not just some nights, right? It's not maximized on some nights and lower on other nights. Yeah, the full moon has other effects, right, on our bodies and on parasites and other things. So traditional cultures would oftentimes fast for the 3 days of the full moon, which may help you deal with whatever's going on during a full moon. HEPA air purifier for allergy potential. Yes, I would get some sort of air purifier. And you can get these things on a budget, or you can pay a lot of money for them, or you can go in the middle and pay a medium amount of money. So Dr. Graf on Twitter has this PDF. He also has a Substack, and he'll send you his PDF for like $5 or even for free if you really want it. You don't want to pay for it, or you can't pay for it. And he has this cool little kind of DIY air purifier made out of where the air goes through a lump of charcoal that you can buy from the store. May even work better than HEPA air purifiers. I would love to like launch like a brand of air purifiers that just uses lump charcoal from the store instead of HEPA filters. It's like a dream of mine. I think it's awesome. Awesome idea. So yeah, air purifier is fantastic. And you can make like a box with a box fan and like strap a bunch of HEPA filters to it. And that's a really great air purifier on a budget as well. You can make a box out of the HEPA filters with one side of the box is where the box fan is, or you can just strap a HEPA filter onto the surface of a box fan. But creating a box out of it and using duct tape and putting it all together, it works even better. But yeah, that's really helpful, especially in places where the air quality index is really poor in some cities, and in a lot of homes in the U.S. where there's mold and mold toxins in the air. You want to just have air filters running all the time. GermGuard Costco is a good brand for your information. What is GermGuard? Don't have to answer because I'm looking it up. Oh yeah, antimicrobial, antibacterial, disinfectant cleaner. Interesting. That continues killing viruses for days and other bacteria and microorganisms. Okay, one thing that reminds me of that I came across recently for like prevention and even very early treatment. Again, in that like very first day, is something that's from Ayurvedic medicine. A lot of these things are from Ayurvedic medicine. They've been using them for thousands of years. Is a copper wand. You can get this very cheap on Amazon, but just pure copper. It's like a little wand that you sweep your nose with on both sides. Like try to touch the entire inside of your nose as far as you can reach. Instantly kills microorganisms, viruses, everything. It just explodes them. So that is like super awesome and super effective for prevention. If you're going out somewhere, just sweep your nose before and after, or a couple of times a day, morning, maybe midday, maybe later before going to sleep, and you'll just kill these things before they get a foothold in your nose and before they can start spreading and multiplying. That plus something that most of you probably already know, which is the neti pot saline rinses, so saltwater rinses with neti pot, extremely effective for preventing COVID. Maybe one of the most effective interventions. So I just wanted to mention the copper wand thing, which is really cool. All right, so another Facebook user says that they're bloated after antibiotic use. What can I do? Yeah, so one of the best things for bloating is just to go carnivore or very low carb. Like I used to have a lot of gas, and most people are just like, yeah, that's just normal. Human beings have gas. If you have no carbs, you will have zero gas. Okay, especially if you don't eat dairy, and for most people, if they just eat meat, they just won't have any, like it'll be almost zero gas. Okay, it's shocking. So go low carb to help yourself recover, and then gradually add back healthy carbs once the bloating problem is gone, and maybe start with fruit, but check, before you add things that can cause bloating. And so you'll know yourself that certain things will give you gas, so avoid those for a while. And your microbiome can take 6 to 9 months, to fully recover after antibiotic use. And better than an antibiotic is just to have some vitamin C and take it at the first sign of an illness. Like if you know that you're gonna take an antibiotic if you get sick enough, then I would say it's better to just take vitamin C at the first sign of every illness so that you never have to take an antibiotic. I don't like those kind of like pharmaceutical level interventions like vitamin C in general for like like they're not natural. It's unnatural. There's no way you can get that much vitamin C from the natural environment without, industrial processing. So from that perspective, I don't like it like inherently or like as philosophically. I'm somewhat opposed to doing it. But you know, if you're in like a work situation, or you're traveling somewhere, and you got to be at your best, and you can't get sick, this is a tool that you can use. And if you're somebody who knows that if you get sick enough, you're going to take an antibiotic, I think it's better than an antibiotic, even if you have to do it 3 or 4 times a year to prevent you from ever having to take an antibiotic. It's super effective when you take it at the first sign of symptoms. Um, I can't vouch for how effective it is if you wait beyond the first sign, but it still has an effect in the first day or two. It's just that when I've taken it the first sign, I've never been sick 24 hours later. It's just like always gone. And I've tried it a lot. I've tried it a few times. Um, Warm humidifier increased to 40%, I think, says info seeker. Facebook, another Facebook says my name is Janelle. Okay, that's great until a different user on Facebook starts asking a question and it's not Janelle. I'm still going to say Facebook user on it, but glad you're here, Janelle. Whack Attack 69 says, any chance of having COVID in 2021, 2022 would reactivate iron deficiency anemia? Yeah, so it can reactivate anything that you're prone to, and it can cause, premature aging. It can cause, but yeah, whatever you're already prone to, it can reactivate that. It can cause that, for sure. And this relates to a question that somebody asked. Marsha asked, what are the thoughts on the new study showing fatigue is due to iron levels and/or inability to utilize iron properly? So, yeah, during a COVID infection, serum iron levels can go down, and storage form of iron, the ferritin, can go up. It's a inflammatory marker, and it's used to help fight off infections. That storage form of iron, the ferritin. So you can have what kind of looks like iron deficiency anemia, but it's actually anemia of chronic disease, where you check and see the iron's low, but the ferritin is really high. So in pure iron deficiency anemia, you won't usually have the elevated ferritin, but sometimes there's a little bit of confusion about which is which. But yeah, it could reactivate an iron deficiency briefly, for at least for a period of time. Tour de Lance says, hello, I'm looking for a place to purchase mebendazole 100 milligrams for 27 cents per tablet from India. According to Dr. Paul Merrick, it can help my bladder cancer. Thanks, I've used your site before. So I wouldn't trust anything from India. Even the Indians don't trust pharmaceuticals from India, okay? I mean, I can't stress this enough, all right? I'm in Pakistan right now. It used to be part of India before it broke off in 1947. We don't trust the local pharmaceuticals here either, okay? The only locals who use local pharmaceuticals in Pakistan and India are the ones who can't afford the foreign ones, which are also available, right? So people, if they can afford it, will choose the foreign brands. They know better than you do, okay? They've grown up here, they lived here, and one of my patients in, I don't know, somewhere in Europe, Sweden maybe, she had ivermectin from India, she had ivermectin from Europe, and she had ivermectin from America. And when she took the Indian one, she got chest pain. All right. So I don't know what was in it. Might have been dirt. Okay. So they will put anything in it, right? And people will have a placebo effect sometimes. They'll have no effect sometimes. And the people here in India and Pakistan have figured it out a long time ago that they cannot trust their local pharmaceutical providers. So please, for the love of God, do not buy anything from India, even Mexico. Okay. Don't do it. Get it from America. And it's not that expensive. Usually people are actually paying more for the stuff from India with the shipping and whatever than they pay to get a prescription from me and get it from a local, American pharmacy. It's shocking, and yet it's true. Okay. So do not make that mistake. It's silly. It makes no sense. Ignore all those people who jump into the comments and start posting links to Indian pharmacies and Mexican pharmacies and whatever. Just get a prescription from me. And if you can't pay for the prescription, ask us to write it for free. And then you're going to get it even cheaper. Okay. So, prescription price, even when you pay the prescription price plus you pay the medicine price, it's still cheaper than India and Mexico. I've checked. So there's no reason. First of all, you should be afraid of it. Second of all, it's not even cheaper. So, and it takes like weeks to get here. So there's like no good reason, right? It makes no sense at all. So please, people, stop buying stuff from India and Mexico and just get it from the United States of America, okay? Where you can trust that the FDA has at least, done some work. They have a lot of failings, but at least the quality control for human meds is going to be high. All right, so yeah, sure, they're going to let meds through that are going to kill you, like remdesivir, but at least you're getting remdesivir, right? So at least you're not dying from like lead toxicity or something. You're dying from remdesivir toxicity, okay? Um, so at least what they say is in there, okay? So if something is safe and effective, ivermectin, mebendazole, you're getting ivermectin or mebendazole when you buy it from the US, whereas you don't know you're getting it when you buy it from overseas. And you could be getting something really harmful, not just a placebo. It could be anything. It just with a label on it that says it's mebendazole or ivermectin. I think that's enough on that topic, right? Ziad Atif says, what about infection that results from using old razors to shave the beard? Should one use antibiotics? I mean, you could probably chop up some garlic and put it on that skin and it would take care of the infection. So, maybe sometimes you need an antibiotic if the infection's gotten deep enough and it's bad enough. But there are a lot of really powerful herbal antibiotics that are safer than pharmaceutical antibiotics and gentler, but still are very powerful against bacteria that shouldn't be there. But it depends on the specific situation, and sometimes you just need an antibiotic. Sometimes you can do with a 2 or 3 day, even though they tell you, oh, you must do the whole course. Sometimes that's true. You do need to do a whole course. Other times it's not true. Sometimes you just need a few days, and that's enough to give your immune system enough of a head start to kill off whatever might be remaining. So it's very specific to the person. Vitamin C is one of the most powerful antibiotics on the planet if you get it IV. I find that oral vitamin C works fantastic, but it's not the same as IV vitamin C. And if you take IV vitamin C, you can get rid of almost any infection if you take a high enough dose, 50 to 100 grams. In a lot of places, you need to get a prescription for that dose. And in a lot of places don't even do that dose. What do you think about chelation? Yeah, I love chelation if you need it. So also nebulized glutathione for heavy metal detox. That may be helpful. I don't know, honestly. Not a heavy metal detox expert, but for sure, if you have heavy metals, fulvic acid, humic acid are great, nice place to start, which is in our detox supplement. They help to bind and remove graphene oxide as well as other heavy metals. And it's a natural substance that it comes from shilajit, which is found in the Himalayan mountains. So that's one thing. But if you get a hair mineral analysis, heavy metal test, and you find that you have a particular heavy metal, there may be a specific chelator that's best for it. And chlorella is a great kind of natural, gentler detox method for everything as well. It's a good place to start. First thing for detox is probably you want to clean up your diet and lifestyle, and then kind of stabilize how you feel, and then add some binders like chlorella or something else, or a chelator. All right, InfoSeeker says it's a HEPA air purifier. It was tested on a Canadian Consumer Report TV show against many other brands. Excellent. What's the dose of vitamin C? So I think I mentioned it. It depends on the person what dose will work, and you can't usually predict beforehand. So for adults, what I found is somewhere between 30 to 50 grams, and for children, somewhere like 5 to 10 grams work for my kids. I haven't studied this, and other people's children, I haven't run any studies on this, so I don't know. If you're not getting better, you just take more, and so it doesn't harm you to overdo it because you don't absorb more than 500 milligrams. So your absorption peaks at like half a gram. So when you're taking those really high doses, it's not going into your bloodstream. It's acting in your gut. which is outside your body. It's acting on your gut bacteria. It's acting like Miracle-Gro for the bifidobacteria, which themselves are stimulating your immune function. And the bifidobacteria are really important, especially for COVID spike toxicity, because COVID and spike protein directly lower your bifidobacteria levels. And so people with very high levels are immune to the effects of COVID and spike, but COVID and spike themselves lower the levels of bifidobacteria. So perhaps that's the way vitamin C works when you take it orally. I don't know. I haven't done any studies or been able to find any research that tells you exactly what's happening to explain the effect that I've seen in myself and other people. But you can check out my Substack, which is pinned to blog.mygotodoc.com. I mean, it's on that. It's Substack, but it's at blog.mygotodoc.com. So you can check it out. There's a vitamin C post there, and also on my Twitter, which I have not been checking or updating in a long time now. Right? I deleted Twitter from my phone, people. Social media is not good for you. Okay. I was way overusing my phone for like over a year, and it's just not worth it. Right. So eventually I'll get back into posting, but maybe I'll ask somebody else to post for me my thoughts to Twitter. And maybe eventually I'll go back and use it on the computer and just like set out like 30 minutes or an hour a day, just to, because it's a great place to find information, but you have to have strict controls, so that you don't abuse it. Otherwise, social media can be very stressful for your body and your mind. All right. Turtle Lance is laughing at me for one of the jokes that I made, probably, or for just me looking silly. I don't know, because I'm a little bit behind in this in the messages here. So you can help me. Or okay, info secret: sulforaphane for bladder cancer. Avmacol brand has been studied. Excellent. InfoSeeker is full of information, helpful information. He's not only seeking information, but he is also disseminating information. Fantastic. Yeah, sulforaphane is a chemical found in broccoli, but you really can't get that much from eating pounds and pounds of broccoli. You need to, get it isolated in a supplement, which you can find over the counter. All right, Avmacol has I'm not sure, maybe the spelling's a little off, to activate myrosinase. I don't know what either of those words mean, but thank you. Monica says, thank you for the info on meds from India. I was going to order. Yeah. Do you know of anything that directly impacts spike proteins? So I've been doing Myers cocktails, doesn't seem to help. I highly recommend a few things, right? So I highly recommend plasma donation. And you will feel better. Almost everyone will feel better with plasma donation because it directly removes spike protein and microclots and all sorts of every toxin in your body will come out in the plasma that you donate. And then plasma is like almost entirely water. It's all water almost, right? Plus some proteins like albumin and other things that you can remake yourself as long as you're eating natural, normally like a human being, enough to stay alive. You're going to make more albumin and whatever proteins you lose and antibodies and whatever. Some of the antibodies will be negative. They'll be autoantibodies. They'll come out. That'll be helpful. Some of them will be positive ones, which, again, you'll remove a few of them and you'll make more of them to replace the ones you remove. So it's just water and some plasma proteins, some antibodies, a few micronutrients floating around, but there's no cells. There's no red blood cells, white blood cells, or platelets in the plasma. So plasma donation is really safe, really gentle, and you don't take out all the plasma, you take out a portion of it, right? And so you can do it much more frequently than whole blood donation, again, because it's mostly water and toxins floating around inside of you that you can physically remove. And then once you've removed those toxins from your body, there's less overall toxins in your body. Whatever's left in your tissues will kind of equalize the concentrations between the tissues and the plasma. So more will leak into your plasma, and then you'll donate more plasma and take it out again, and then it'll equalize again. And eventually you dilute the toxins down until there are no toxins, or there are almost no toxins left, because you're replacing the plasma with clean, fresh water that has no toxins in it, hopefully, and clean, fresh food that has no toxins in it, hopefully. So no microplastics, no heavy metals, no, chlorofluorocarbons and forever chemicals. And so you are further and further diluting the toxins in your body. So that's great. and it removes everything that you need to remove, but does it slowly and gradually enough that you may have to do it for a year, may have to do it for 2 years, and you may do it for just 10 days, and you may feel better, and then you may stop doing it, and then you may come to me and say, well, this doesn't work because the benefit doesn't last. And I would tell you, as I'm telling you now, that it does work. You just have to do it longer, right? Same with oxygen therapy. You have to do it for a few months, right? So it stimulates stem cells, and those stem cells, it's not going to stimulate like, you know, enough to fix you completely in 30 minutes or even 30 days. But if you give it 90 days, 120 days, 3 or 4 months, it will make a huge impact on your health. And you may be half the way there or 90% of the way there, and you just need to finish the treatment, right? So if something's helping you and then you stop it and it doesn't help you anymore, it means you haven't finished it yet. You haven't gotten done with it. And some things are expensive, right? Like ozone therapy helps a lot of people, but they can only afford to do it for a month or two, and then they stop doing it and they feel worse again. Um, that may not directly fix the underlying problem the way oxygen therapy that stimulates stem cell production will fix the underlying problem, and the way that plasma donation will fix the underlying problem, right? Some things are just band-aids and they help you feel fantastic, and then they wear off and they really don't last. But that's not the case for things that are addressing the underlying root cause, like removing toxins or stimulating stem cells, right? Those are addressing root causes, and if you do them long enough, they will give a permanent benefit. Um, okay, so what else can you do for spike protein? Nattokinase directly impacts it. Ivermectin directly impacts it. Bromelain, serrapeptase, NAC. If it's regular NAC, high dose, like 50 milligrams per kilogram, that'll be like 3 to 4 grams a day in divided doses. If it's augmented NAC, usually you don't need anywhere near that much. It's like 200 milligrams 3 times a day or something, or twice a day. That works. I don't know why it's more effective or more potent, but seems to be. So it's worth it if you can get it from Vita Health Apothecary. Remdesivir is the generic for baricitinib by Olumiant. Never take either of these. They baricitinib into my 14-day stay in the hospital. They snuck baricitinib into my 14-day stay in the hospital, and a year later developed a bladder. Yeah. Stay as far away from mainstream medicine as you can in general. Sauna and sulforaphane. Sulforaphane increases detox pathways, yes. By the way, Prolon research increases bifidobacteria. Prolon research, like the fasting mimicking diet. Vitamin C increases bifidobacteria. Ivermectin increases bifidobacteria. Retired fired RN. Yikes. Info seeker. Yeah, I mean, I know a lot of nurses who ended up either getting fired or retiring just because they couldn't stand it anymore. A lot. Yeah. And I'm just grateful that I could start helping people without having in part of the mainstream medical system anymore. People who are stuck in it, or they're trying to do the best they can in a very, very flawed system, and that's tough. And at this point, I wouldn't want to go like you just have to give shots, right? You can't be a healthcare professional in the US without getting tons of shots, right? So that's the biggest problem. How can we contact you to become a patient or get prescription for ivermectin, for example? So great question. This is, you go to mygotodoc.com, mygotodoc.com, and you can register there and become a patient. Anyone can register for free if they want to there, and become a patient in the practice and can ask questions for free, and get medical answers. There's this medical answers service that we provide for free. Fasting mimicking diet, Prolon increases bifido. Cool. And InfoSeeker was in the ICU for 33 years. Amazing. Thanks for your service. That's the place that you can do the best, or help people with mainstream medicine the best, is in places like ICU, or the ER, because those people, I mean, there's you can't put them in usually in the sun and heal them or make them ground or eat something correct. I mean, you just need to get them, keep them alive and get them back on their feet and get them out the door so that they can get back to their life. And sometimes there's that's the best of mainstream medicine, the emergency services and the intensive care services. there are some issues with them. That we do. There are some harmful things, right? Like they'll give remdesivir in the ICU, and they'll give other things that can cause significant damage. But um, there's a lot of things that you just, there's no other way to save your life in some cases than to be in an ICU or an emergency room. So Yulia Manad, this is a question not from the live stream, but that we got earlier, asked, I've read about metformin helping with long COVID. Do you know anything about it? Yeah, it does seem to be very helpful. It's one of those things that has some benefits and some harms. It has some toxicity for um, the mitochondria, and so it has, you have to weigh the risks and benefits and see whether whether you really need it, right? So there's other things that I find to be far safer, like lifestyle adjustments and diet, and low carb and low histamine and autoimmune paleo, types of diets, and ivermectin and low dose naltrexone. And especially, if those aren't working, most people haven't tried higher doses of ivermectin and even LDN above 4.5 milligrams of LDN, or above 0.2 milligrams per kilogram of ivermectin per day. You can go up 10 times that amount in some people for short periods, and they'll find that they start to get better. And people mostly haven't tried, plasma donation. They haven't tried fixing their light environment. They haven't tried red light therapy. They haven't tried oxygen therapy, with an oxygen concentrator at home. So you get, similar to hyperbaric oxygen, but it's so much more convenient, so much cheaper, and you're just going to do it. Like, it's hard to keep up with hyperbaric oxygen. Even if you rent it, it's going to be like $500 a month, and it's not even going to be that effective because it's only going to be like a 1.4 atmosphere soft cell chamber that you can rent at your home. Um, Versus, the most benefit you're going to get from hyperbaric would be in the highest atmospheric pressure. So like 2 to 2.4 or 3 atmospheres of pressure, that it has to be a rigid chamber, and you have to drive somewhere, and you have to sit there, and then you have to drive back, and you could spend like, 2 hours just to do 1 hour a day, versus getting an oxygen concentrator, which might rent for like 20, 30, 40 bucks a month, and you can buy it outright for 500 bucks or 600 bucks. It's just, this box just sits in your house or at your work, and turn it on, put the mask on, do whatever you want. You don't have to climb into this shell, and just breathe the oxygen for a couple hours a day. You can do it while you're sleeping, set an alarm to wake up and turn it off. You don't want to overdo it. So oxygen, just like a lot of things, the dose makes the toxin. If you do it for too long, it'll have a toxic effect on your lungs. So, up to 2 hours a day. Anita Buyas, hopefully that's somewhere in the territory of being the correct pronunciation. I started 15 milligrams prednisone for my long COVID symptoms 1 week ago, and it is helping, as it did in 2022 when I was a long hauler. Please can you tell me what is the new protocol for prednisone? How long should I take it? I'm taking LDN, metformin, NAC, quercetin, vitamin C, niacin, nattokinase, aspirin. Should I add anything more other than ivermectin, which didn't help in my case? So maybe higher dose ivermectin, like I just said. We were using very low doses compared to what we're using today. As long as you had no side effects, then try a higher dose, as I'm so eager to recover. So yeah, 15 milligrams of prednisone, maybe use it for a week, maybe 2 weeks, and then try to go to 10, and then for a week or two, and then try to go to 5 for a week or two. There's no specific set protocol that's going to work for everyone. You play around with it and see what works for you. If you go down to 10 and you feel a lot worse, then go back up to 15 for a little bit longer before you go back down to 10, and then to 5, and then stop it. Cindy Josh Hammer says, I have a friend who's going through cancer treatment, and her doctor put her on a plant-based diet. Then I hear you mention how a carnivore diet can improve inflammation. I'm confused about what diet is best for our bodies. Can you please share? Yeah, so I am too. Everyone is, right? So it may be specific to a particular individual at a specific time in their life, depending on what they're dealing with at that time. I have a friend who is probably the physician I respect most in the world, who has helped so many people who can't afford it. He doesn't even charge them, and he basically uses a vegan diet for everyone in the beginning, who has serious disease like cancer. And like if you follow his directions, you will heal. He will eventually heal you. It's incredible. And so people who come to him are desperate and they're willing to do anything. And those are basically the only people that he has time for. Like if you don't do what he says, he doesn't really have time to spend because he can, help somebody else who will do what he says. And so he puts people on like just like steamed vegetables and vegetable juicing with like non-sweet vegetable juicing, the really bitter stuff, and 4 times a day. And they may be on this for months, and it's basically like a modified fast, right? You're getting structured water from the vegetables, and you're getting a lot of micronutrients, but you know there are plant toxins in there. So one of the theories around carnivore is that plant toxins are harming you, so you need to remove them. But somehow they work great for these patients. And so any drastic dietary change where you start to lose a lot of weight, and as they do on this drastic dietary plan of his, will get rid of toxins and will help you. And I don't know whether his patients would do better if he put them on like carnivore from the beginning. Maybe they would heal faster. I don't know. Like his perception of it and his philosophy and theory is that there's a lot of enzymes and beneficial nutrients, as we all know, in plants, and that those are helping people heal, all the phytonutrients and everything. And the carnivores think that if you need phytonutrients, they are present in the muscle meat of the animals that ate the phytonutrients, that ate the plants. So I think both of them can work, and maybe one of them is better for a particular person than the other, and maybe carnivore works better for one person and not as well for somebody else. Maybe carnivore is not optimal for healing cancer. I don't know. Maybe it's like too, um, like meat and fat, like they build you up. They're may not be optimal for like a rapid detox where you're trying to let go of things instead of building up. You're trying to let go. So certainly, if you do carnivore, you're not going to be on like a like his patients are basically getting no calories. Like they're eating non-starchy vegetables and a lot of vegetable juice, and the vegetable juices have almost no calories, right? Because they're not starchy vegetables and they're not sweet vegetables. So it's almost like they're feeling full and they don't feel like eating anything, but they're rapidly losing weight because they're essentially fasting. It's like a modified version of a fast, which you could get from like maybe a clear bone broth that doesn't have a lot of fat in it. But if you're eating meat, especially if you're eating enough calories, you're not going to have maybe as rapid of a weight loss, and you may not be able to reduce toxins as much. Personally speaking, I found that I just didn't have much of an appetite when I was purely carnivore, so I did rapidly lose weight. And people will lose weight up to a point, but beyond that, they may not keep losing weight when they do carnivore, unless they start reducing calories. So it's a good question, and I don't have a great answer for it. And But obviously, carnivore is fantastic for inflammation. It may not be optimal for something like cancer, um, but a lot of people do carnivore, and up to a point, it fixes all their problems. And for many people, it fixes all their problems, and they can't add plants without adding the problems back. So, yeah, I do think human beings are flexible enough to be able to tolerate different diets, right? So I don't buy this thing that, oh, it's written in your your genetic code that like you have to eat like mostly plants or mostly animals or whatever. I think you can eat based on where you are in the world, and for a period of time, you may need to reduce carbs, um, and in order to correct your insulin response. But then you should be able to reintroduce them. It might take a year, it might take 2 years, but eventually, once your insulin resistance disappears and your visceral fat goes away, you can reintroduce carbs. Anyone should be able to, healthy carbs. But people may still have a certain tolerance level for the carbs, but healthy carbs, no seed oils, no refined foods. I think anyone on the planet can probably tolerate and be really healthy on that diet once they get to the point where um, they can tolerate it again. They can tolerate the carbs again. So yeah, I'm not sure what I believe yet, right? So yeah, I mean, we know plants have toxins. Maybe there's a hormetic effect where if the toxins are minimized enough, they become beneficial, right? They push you in the direction of benefiting you rather than harming you. Um, so, great question. Terry says, apparently COVID-19 still hasn't been isolated and no government can prove it. So it's their toxic jab that's causing issues or the flu. Certainly a toxic jab is causing issues. I, I do believe COVID-19 has been isolated. People keep saying this. It's not really true. So it has been isolated as much as you can isolate a virus, right? So some people will be like, oh, viruses don't even exist because you can't really isolate them. But I don't really buy that either. Gene says, what about those that caught COVID from shedding the vaccine? I'm not sure what the question means. Like you can get what looks just like COVID from just spike toxicity, from shedding, which is maybe what you're talking about, or perhaps you can shed like lipid nanoparticles and get mRNA. I don't know if that's possible, but yeah, it's not exactly a viral infection. It's not a viral infection, if from shedding, but it could look very similar. Maggie says, do you think the spike protein antigen test or the antibody test is a more meaningful data point? Spike protein antigen test. So what spike protein antigen test? What is the spike protein antigen test? If you could get an antigen test, which I don't think is actually commercially available, then that would be probably pretty helpful. I mean, they do it in like research labs, and they're doing, they're checking for the spike protein itself, right? Which what is an antigen? Like the spike protein is an antigen, right? So what that would mean is you're actually checking for the spike protein itself, the presence of the spike protein itself, rather than your immune response to the spike protein, which is the antibody. So the antigen, the spike protein, triggers an antibody response, and then you can, in America, as far as I know, you can only test antibodies. Let's see, Sinobiological SARS-CoV-2 antigen test. You can get like a S1 subunit of the spike in from Incel DX. That's the closest thing. Oh, you're maybe talking about like the antigen tests that were used for testing if you have COVID-19 or not. Perhaps, right? Like the nasal swabs and stuff. Maybe that's what you're talking about, which is fine. There's just no antigen test in the blood, right? So you can have like an antigen test, superficial mucosal antigen test. So if it's done properly, and you're sure that it actually tests for the antigen, then and you can find that you're shedding it or it's in your stool or something, then I think that's very helpful because it's a direct test for spike protein itself rather than an indirect test. The antibody test, the issue with that is that even once the antigen itself, the spike, is gone completely, say you have no spike in your body, the antibodies could still be high. Your immune system could just be really revved up and have a really high antibody level, and the thing could be there or not be there, right? Usually, most of the time, once the thing is completely gone that's stimulating the antibody response, the antibody levels will come down, but not always. So hopefully that makes sense. All right, so we're about an hour, 10 minutes into this. Let's just go and check the live stream again. Tour de Lance says, so I caught COVID pneumonia even though I was never vaccinated. 14 days in the hospital, 11 weeks on oxygen. I ordered ivermectin from you, and 2 days later I was off the oxygen. Incredible, fantastic. Yeah, so there is, it's not just the shots. I got long COVID way before the shots were rolled out, and it was very typical, and it lasted for, the worst of it maybe a year, and then little lingering symptoms for another year, and then it's completely gone. I mean, for me, the cold plunge seemed to completely just wrap it up for me, and I did the cold plunge persistently for a couple of months, and then I haven't done it for a while, but it was great for getting rid of the final last lingering issues. InfoSeeker says, decrease IGF on vegan as opposed to carnivore high protein. IGF can drive cancer. Yeah, yeah, that's a good point. Great point. So insulin-like growth factor can go up. Yeah, so this is exactly what I was kind of saying, but more the scientific explanation of it. So yeah, you know, protein and fat, they're like diets that you would use to bulk up and build up, and building anabolic, basically anabolic diets rather than catabolic diets. So you need some catabolism off for cancer. And when you're anabolic, you're storing things, you're building things, you're taking things in, and when you're catabolic, you're starting to release things, break things down, get rid of toxins and stuff like that, which is important for cancer. Seema Bodorashvili says, "Thank you for all you do. Your expertise, advice, and commitment to humanity is admirable." You're welcome. Dr. Sabine Hazan isolated the entire genome. Yeah. Of SARS-CoV-2. InfoSecret T-cell direct tests. Yeah, so the T-cell will test, the T-cell test will test for T cells rather than the antibodies from the B cells. So that's another thing to do, to check to see whether you were exposed to COVID at any point, even if you don't get an antibody response. Michelle Peterson says, "What did you do during your long COVID for treatment?" So I'm one of these somewhat crazy people who don't like to take medications. So I didn't take ivermectin personally. I don't even like to take supplements. So I just did, I did Qigong in the beginning, breathwork stuff in the beginning to deal with the severe anxiety and insomnia. But mostly I just put up with it and tried to ignore it, just power through it, right? Not the best thing I could have done. But I was able to take the edge off. I was able to feel a lot better, and but still it would get worse, it would get better, and it was still lingering. And then I started the cold plunge, and the cold plunge just like took the symptoms within like 1 or 2 weeks. The symptoms just went to zero, and I was like, oh my god, this is amazing. So since then I was telling people, try the cold plunge, try the cold plunge. For me, what it felt like, it was like my nervous system was just all revved up, anxious, and the cold plunge, almost like this signal where it revs it up even more, right? Uncontrollable amount of stimulation, which makes your body hit the brakes really, really hard, right? For some reason, your nervous system is not hitting the brakes. It's like pedal to the metal all the time, not hitting the brakes. But this, then when you overwhelm it, right, with this severe cold, sudden shock, it does hit the brakes. It hits them hard, and it just shuts off. It just resets your nervous system. That's what it felt like. Um, what's the difference between long COVID and vaccine injury? So they're both spike toxicity, essentially. Long COVID, in some people, there may be active viral infection somewhere in an immune privileged site, someplace where it's difficult to find. But really, they seem to be very similar. Long COVID seems to be easier to treat, either because people just believe that it's not as bad as vaccine injury. Like the vaccine injured, once they realize they have vaccine injury, oftentimes they like psych themselves out, and they start to go down all these rabbit holes and give themselves a nocebo effect by convincing themselves of how horrible the vaccine was, what a big mistake they made, they'll never get better. Now it's like rewritten their DNA and all this stuff. All these are just stories that people are harming themselves by telling themselves. So what you tell yourself, what you end up believing, will have an effect on your health. It's like voodoo. You're doing voodoo to yourself, and you don't have to. So don't read all that stuff. If you have one of these problems, you need to read only positive information and positive testimonials, and protect yourself from nocebo effects, which are the opposite of placebo effects. Try to find placebo effects, and you'll get better. So I've seen it over and over again. I've seen vaccine injured patients completely recover, and I've seen long COVID patients completely recover. So neither one of them are irreversible. InfoSeeker says cold plunge activates heat shock proteins, yeah, and immune system and adrenaline. Yeah. So heat also activates heat shock proteins, which is where the name comes from. And cold as well, it does as well. Yeah, adrenaline goes up. At the FLCCC conference in April of last year, I presented a bunch of the research around cold plunging, cold exposure, and so that's freely available on the FLCC website. And I think myself did like a webinar or something on the same thing. I went into more detail and spent longer talking about it in the webinar than I did at the FLCC conference, where I had like 20 minutes, and I was just like talking like a mile a minute, like somebody who, like one of those people at an auction, right? And just so it was too fast. I should have really cut it down to like half or a quarter of the length. But there were just so many things I wanted to put in there. So that's one of my failings, is that sometimes I just don't trim. I don't trim what I write. So, but yeah, it has a lot of effects. It hasn't been very, very well studied, unfortunately. Other thing, I also mentioned grounding in that and went through some of the research on grounding. Also has well studied, but is very important, because before the last 150 years, we were always grounded for all of human history, and now we're basically never grounded. So the body expects to be grounded. That's its natural state all the time. And nowadays, at least you can get grounded while you're sleeping in bed, and maybe while you're sitting at your desk or at your couch at home. You can get a grounding mat for those locations where you sit, and you can get grounded bed sheets and pillowcases for your bed, and at least you'll be grounded way more than most people. And perhaps that'll be what makes the biggest difference for you, for your health. All right, everyone, thanks so much for being here. Thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe and spread the word. 622 people watching. Awesome. It's really starting to take off. It used to be like a 20th of this. There used to be like 5, 10, 20, 30 people watching. But we started getting more people watching. So really appreciate it. And I know I was talking about light environment and like turn off the lights at night. How can you do it when this live streams at like 10 p.m., right? So that's a problem. So maybe like turn off, I don't know, dim the screen, wear blue blockers, listen to the replay the next day. If you really need to be on for the live, then be my guest, be on for the live, but try to minimize the effects of the light. All right, everyone, have a good one, and see you next time. Bye-bye.